Thinking Basketball Podcast. My name is Ben. Welcome back to another episode. This is actually our 300th episode if you're into the whole round numbers thing. Happy New Year. It's December 31st. Cody, how are you doing?
This is so exciting. There's so many things. I love the celebration of arbitrary numbers. Like 300 is a really big deal to me. Although I wonder how many episodes I've been on, because I was kind of on for a couple and then I wasn't. And then I joined, I think, around 94, but then I wasn't on every episode since then. So I'm like, I wonder if we hit 200 together.
Regardless,
Regardless,
half the
this is
episodes.
300.
Yeah, at least half the episodes. I was planning on doing something big and fancy and integrating a bunch of guests and interviews and having like a 2-hour expose brought to you by someone very important or something like that. But the problem with that is then you have to actually go through and do all that stuff. And no one wants to come on this show and talk to me about basketball. So here we are. Here we are today, a week after, in the aftermath of the 25 under 25. And I'm gonna beat you to it because I thought about the end of that show, which always goes off the rails. And after we finished recording, I said to myself, how could you take Keegan Murray when there's a player with the same archetype but better at everything in Trey Murphy III? I feel like you bullied me. I listened back to the segment. I feel like you bullied me a little bit. You were I brought him up. You were dismissive. And then I don't know what happened. I have my notes. I get thrown off. You started picking Grizzlies players left and right. I couldn't figure it out. Trey Murphy III should have gone like 17th in that draft. Kick Keegan Murray out. Slide everybody down. Get more Thompson twins in there. That would have done the trick.
I do have to say, I think I texted you. I was like, you know what? I should pop in the Pelicans just to double check my homework here. And I was watching and I texted you and I'm like, we made a mistake. Like Trey Murphy, he should have been drafted for sure. So I apologize to any Pelicans fans out there. Trey Murphy should have been. I do think Keegan Murray's probably a better defender at this point, but I get your point.
Yeah. And you know what's funny? I've been watching some Blazers games this week at night. And I was watching these Blazers games, and then I threw on a Warriors game from yesterday against the Cavs, and Jonathan Kuminga just had like 2 just ridiculous plays in a row. One of them just completely missing a rotation, and I said to myself, no, I'd rather have it Avdia than Kuminga. We got to leave this 25-25 thing in the past.
One more thing. The one thing I have to apologize for is
another apology.
I also went back, double check. Listen, I'm somebody that likes to double check my work, see how things are going. I was wrong on Maxey. I just was. Having him 14 on my board is just an incorrect opinion. He should have been, I don't know where he went, but he should have been top 10 for me. And I feel bad about that because I've always liked Maxey. I've been a fan of his game, and I quit him for some reason, and I shouldn't have. Tyrese Maxey is a very nice little player. And I whiffed, Ben. I whiffed.
Yeah. Well, today, Cody, we have a chance to do it all over again by upsetting 0 fan bases, because today we're going to talk about the best teams in the NBA. We're going to check back in on our power rankings, and we may do, maybe one more check-in, depending on the nature of the season before we get to like the playoffs and the end of the year. If Cody has some big announcement about some shakers and movers like he's made in the past. But we did this at the very beginning of the season where we had a little data and trying to sort out what it all meant. And now we're about a third of the way through the year. We have a nice sample size. You get that like 25, 30 game sample in basketball. It starts to get indicative of a lot of stuff. But also, it's still early. We're not playing playoff basketball. What do we make of it? Where do we size up the team? Are there any new members, the new additions to the inner circle of title contenders, if you will? That's what we're going to discuss today. And I'll pass it to you because I want to know what team's on your mind. Who would you like to discuss? Yes.
I think we have to go with a big hitter here because I'm going to get something out of the way. I'm going to get I would like to think somewhat of an obvious thing. I think right now you and I probably inarguably Celtics Thunder inner circle, right? Does that feel that sound nice to you?
I don't even think we need to talk about them today. They're great teams, inner circle. Easy. We can move on.
I've thought about this next part for
here we go.
Like the last week.
Can I tell everyone that we have not talked about this in any capacity, text, person at all? And I just knew, I'm like, I know this. I know how this show's going to go. I know what's going on with Cody. I know what he's watching, and I'm going to let him have the floor. I can't wait for this moment. This is so exciting.
Well, I feel like this isn't anything special based on how well they're performing. Although I do want to say this team I'm going to bring up, I don't think they're quite as good as the Celtics or Thunder, but I'm gonna give them like the entrance, the what do you call it? The vestibule, Ben, of the inner circle. I think the Cleveland Cavaliers have to be a vestibule of the inner circle NBA team right now.
Okay. Well, what does that mean? Are they actually in the inner circle for you?
I mean, it means that if they won the championship, if they were in the finals, I would not be surprised. I genuinely would not be surprised. But I do think the Celtics and Thunder are better, but that's not a knock on the Cavaliers. It's mostly just like, I think the Celtics and Thunder kind of have the potential to be literal all-time types of teams. And because of that, I'm just like, I don't know, the Cavaliers are an incredible team. They happen to be stacked up against these other two just beyond incredible teams. But I think the Cavaliers are good enough to be like, yeah, they could be in the finals and I wouldn't be shocked at all.
Well, there's a couple interesting things. We're kind of trending toward this weird distribution of like 2016, where if you remember, the Cavs were, not the Cavs, sorry, the Cavs won the title. The Warriors were an all-time regular season team setting the wins record. And then the Spurs were right behind them at like 67 wins. And the Thunder won a ton of games and were incredible when they were healthy. And then the Cavs ended up winning the title. And then after that, it was just like, good luck finding a legitimate, maybe a West team or two look like they could, the Clippers or something look like they could be potent, but you had this very, very top heavy distribution. And we're starting to see something similar again this season, where there's 4 or 5 legitimately just terrible teams that you look at them and you're like, are any of them going to win 20 games? There's a lot of mediocrity. There's a very rich, robust middle class. And depending on where you are, if you're a middle class team playing middle class teams every night, it's just like flip a coin. Someone's going to win and someone's going to lose. And there's going to be a lot of bloodshed in those games, metaphorically. And then you look at the top, and OKC has won 11 in a row because the championship game doesn't count from the in-season tournament, the NBA Cup. And the Cavs are 27-4, and the Celtics are doing their thing. They're 23-8 after beating the Raptors by 70 points today. That's going on while we're recording. Let's see. I don't know what the final was. Oh, they only won by 54. Sorry. I got carried away. So that will help the margin of victory in the net rating. And Cleveland's 27-4 right now. And they had this on the telecast last night in the game against the Warriors. Cleveland started 27-4. It's the third best start in NBA history by record. But the record belongs to the 2016 Warriors, who were 29-2 after 31 games. 4 more teams were 28-3. These are like all-time, like the 08 Celtics and the 96 Bulls and teams that win titles. And then the Cavs are 27-4. Cody, this blew my mind. They're the 16th team to start 27-4. 16 teams have now started 27-4. So you think like, man, 27-4, they're right behind the best start ever. Is this going to be like a dominant title team? And then it's just a list of other teams that have also had a hot start. Some of them win titles, some of them don't. And I think that's kind of how I feel about Cleveland. Like, they're obviously fantastic, and they could win the 1 seed in the West easily. And I wouldn't be surprised if they won 65 games or whatever it is. But I don't think they're as good as Boston and Oklahoma City. And I kind of feel like, are they like half an inner circle? What does that mean? They're not quite in the same as the other inner circle teams. So do they get their own tier of like team that can kind of compete with them? And here's what I come back to. If I threw those 3 teams together, or if I say you're an inner circle title contender, to me, that has to mean something like, when we put you up against the other best teams, especially in multiple series, you have to be around a coin flip, or you have to be very competitive with those matchups most of the time. And while I think Cleveland, especially if they have home court advantage, could win one of those, I just have a much harder time going like, oh yeah, Cleveland, OKC, Cleveland, Boston right now in the playoffs could go either way.
You don't feel that. So if it was a Celtics Cavaliers matchup, and the Cavaliers end up winning a very hard-fought 6 or 7 game series, you would come on the pod and be like, I'm flabbergasted right now.
No, I wouldn't be stunned. That's why I'm saying there's some space between what we're talking about with the inner circle guys with Oklahoma City and Boston, and then where you put Cleveland. I mean, what did you say at the beginning? There was a circular opening into the what do you call it? A vestibule? What did you say?
It's the vestibule of the inner circle. I think it's like like in the Inferno. I think like when Dante is entering like the 9 circles of hell, the first part's the vestibule of hell. This is like the vestibule of the inner circle. So they're still an inner circle team, but they're like a second tier of inner circle team.
You're cheating. Yeah.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I really don't think I am. Okay, let's talk
So
about
you have
the Cavaliers.
three. You have three inner circle teams for the rest of the year.
Yeah.
Okay. I still have 2.5. Cleveland feels like their own tier. Yeah.
Let's talk about Cleveland for a little bit, because I think something that maybe even I said at the beginning of the year was they had this incredible start. Their offense was incredible and whatever else. And I think I was literally like, well, at the end of the season, they're not going to have a top 5 offense of all time. Well, as it stands, last I checked the numbers, they currently have the second best relative offensive rating ever. And I'm pretty sure it's like behind the 2004 Mavericks. There's like a +9 offense or something like that. And I mean, I'm blown away by that, Ben. I'm blown away. And even like we're far enough into the season that however they finish, if they even keep going at 85% of that and they end up with like a +7.5 type of offensive rating, I mean, that's still an all-time incredible offensive team. But the thing about the Cavaliers that I really like is this is not an offensively slanted type of build. Like they have 2 bigs out there. They have 2 defensive bigs out there, 2 rim protecting guys. Evan Mobley, obviously, in a perennial defensive player of the year type of guy. So when you go to the playoffs, it's not like, oh, they're going to get crushed because they just can't play defense. They're just a one-sided team. It's like, no, actually, this is the first time that we've seen them flip to this side of it. So the fact that I can see them playing both sides of the ball at a very, very high level, that intrigues me, because I feel like their defense could actually step up a little bit in the playoffs, which is something we've seen from some championship level teams the last couple of seasons. And I think that's a big part of where I'm coming from with this team.
Their offense crushing people is fascinating, because even if it comes back down to earth as the season goes on, which I think it will a little bit, I think when we talked about it, what I said was something like +4 to +6 wouldn't surprise me, which is still great. I think they're +7. Well, technically they're +9, but they're outperforming. They've had a very easy schedule. When we start adjusting for opponent and things like that, it starts to look more like +7. And I think even if you're like a +6 offense on the entire year, that's like a crazy good offense. And what they've been able to do with the spacing and shooting, and Garland and Mitchell. Mitchell is a nuclear weapon. Like the game last night, they start the second half. He just drills 4 27-foot pull-up threes on someone's head. It might have been a different defender each time. I'm not sure. But like it was classic Mitchell. And having those 2 guys out there and then getting more from Mobley, there's a lot of good stuff to like there. Cody, to me, my hesitation, whatever semantics we're arguing about here with inner circle, my hesitation to put them on the same line as the other 2 teams, assuming Chet Holmgren is healthy, which Button Man in the comments is pointing out, like we still don't 100% sure for certain know what's going to happen with Chet. But assuming that's the case, my hesitation is when you get to the postseason, Evan Mobley comfortably hitting a 3 or 2 a game when he's wide open at 40%, is that actually his true efficiency on those shots when teams ignore him and scheme him? Are they going to play a lot of double bigs? What happens to Jared Allen? And then you look at the rest of the roster, and it's like, yes, when you have 4 really good players, it helps the other guys so much. But how much do I trust in a battle against an elite team with 5 good players on the court at all times? How much do I trust the George Niang minutes and the Max Strus minutes and all these kinds of guys? I mean, I think your mileage varies. If you really trust those guys and you think all those things hold up, then I think they're easily on the same line as the other 2 contenders.
Well, something to get into the numbers a little bit more, and then I want to talk about a couple of the other role players that the Cavaliers have. But something that's really worked for the Cavaliers right now is when you have all 4 of their big guys out there: Allen, Mobley, Mitchell, Garland. What are they? They're like a plus, trying to pull up my number. They're like a +8.8 when all 4 of them are out there. That's a very good number. Okay. But then they have this thing where they section them off. There's like 2 groups of them, right? They usually have Mitchell and Mobley out there together, and they have Garland and Allen out there. When Mitchell and Mobley are out there, they're +14. And when Garland and Allen are out there, they're +12. That's, without the other ones as well, right? And so it's kind of like any iteration of what they have out there is just incredible. And obviously when you get to the playoffs, you want your best players to play the best when they're together. because obviously you're going to have more minute load. It's going to be a higher percentage of what's actually on the court. But of course, unless you're playing the Knicks, like guys aren't going to be playing 46 minutes a game. So you still kind of have to split it up a little bit. But something that really works is when you have those lineups, when you have Mitchell and Mobley out there, when you have Garland and Allen out there, Ty Jerome and Karis LeVert have done a great job. I've been a little bit of a Karis LeVert like skeptic throughout his career. I've really enjoyed what he's done as kind of a connective tissue, can get into the paint, move the ball around. Both Garland and Mitchell are so good at moving off ball and just destroying you from not having the ball themselves. They can, of course, go into their pull-up game and run a pick and roll incredibly, but they can go off ball and then they're just as lethal. So the fact that they have multiple guys, I think according to the database, there are 4 players on the team, the 2 guards and then Jerome and Karis LeVert, who are averaging over 10 drives per 36 minutes. That doesn't happen often. You don't have like guys playing that many minutes that drive that often, and getting into the paint and be able to splash out that way makes for like, frankly, an impossible offense to stop. Right. And so I'm not even like basing my argument just on how good Garland and Mitchell is. It's how good the role players have been as well at setting them up.
Yeah, but you actually hit on something that I think is critical, which is that they're running hot, and it goes back to taking the actual results we've seen in the regular season so far. And again, I don't want to sound too dismissive of them because I think they're going to continue to win a lot of games, even when these things come back down to earth. But Karis LeVert is shooting 48% on his threes. I mean, I just have a hard time believing that Karis LeVert is legitimately a 40% three-point shooter, let alone 48%. Ty Jerome is a great call out because he's been fantastic and he's played better. But again, 42% on his threes. Evan Mobley, 43% on his threes. Isaac Okoro, 49% on his threes. I just have a really hard time buying into these things forget like the whole sample of the year. We're just not going to see it. But then the pressure cooker of the playoffs, what does that look like? I do think it's a little different, although I love the Ty Jerome shout out because I think guys like that are key to helping you win key playoff series against the other great teams. So, yeah, I mean, how do you feel about Dean Wade? He's played some nice defense lately. The Cavs are really good defensively as well, which I think makes them compelling. But those are my issues. We can move on. I think they're phenomenal. I don't know how you classify them compared to the other 2 teams.
Well, I think what's really nice is you just said a bunch of names, right? Okoro, Dean Wade, Ty Jerome, Karis LeVert, Max Strus. Like that's a deep team all of a sudden, right? Like you're looking at a rotation where if something's not working with somebody, it's like, all right, I guess Okoro's not shooting 50% from 3 this game. Might as well bench him and put Strus out there for his minute. So I think you have some flexibility there where you have some teams where it's like, well, I guess we got to play so-and-so because we don't have anything else besides like this bag of bones on the bench right now. So the Cavaliers have that role player type of flexibility along with 4 guys that are, I mean, Mitchell, I've been arguing is a fringe top 10 player in the league. Garland has been playing like a fringe all NBA player. I mean, you have 2 guys of that caliber plus Mobley and Allen who are sub all-star, if not more sub all-star plus players. Like that's a lot of talent just in those 4 guys.
Yeah, it's a lot of talent, but you also get interesting stuff like, are they winning bench minutes that you wouldn't necessarily get in the playoffs because of the staggering that you talked about earlier versus all 4 of them playing? I just think it's fascinating, and I'm just not sure if we're going to get answers before we get to March, but hopefully we can. The other thing we haven't mentioned here is they've played this crazy easy schedule. They've played like one real team in the last month or month and a half or something like that, the Celtics twice, and then they've played Atlanta and Denver a pair of times each. They actually lost to the Hawks both times. One of the guys on the team had a great line the other day. He's like, against the rest of the league, we're great, but against Atlanta, we struggle. And they are 27-2 against the rest of the league. So maybe we should move on from Cleveland, unless you have more to say, which it looks like you do.
No, I have a transition. I have a nice little transition.
Oh, okay.
Because you bring up this schedule thing, Ben. I've been noticing this. Like a couple of the teams are just going through these like pockets where let's just say they're not playing top 10 teams. So let's go to talk to somebody like the New York Knicks. Mm-hmm. Here are the last few games that the Knicks have played. And I know it's because I was trying to scout out the Knicks a little bit. And I'm like, I want to see them play a good team. Here's my choices over the last 10 or so games. They've played the Wizards, Magic, Spurs, Raptors, Pelicans, Wolves, Magic, Hawks, Raptors, Pistons, Hornets, Magic, Pelicans, Hornets. So that's the Wizards twice, Magic 3 times, Pelicans twice, Hornets twice, Raptors twice.
Yeah, the Magic and the Wolves and the Spurs are those are good games. Also, you should check those out, and they're real teams.
Okay, we're talking Franzless, Pauloless Magic in there, right? So like all of a sudden that takes a lot of shine off of those particular teams. I'm just saying that like when you pull up a team like the Knicks, you're like, oh, I want to see what they're like against another inner circle team. You got to go back to like November. You're going back to November, and all of a sudden you're like, is this even relevant anymore? So that's my transition to the Knicks. What do you think about them right now?
They're unstoppable. They're the best. Can't stop the Knicks. They should be in the inner circle title contender, Cody.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. No, I can't go that. I can't go that far.
I was gonna say, no. I almost took my sweatshirt off. I was getting
well, no, seriously, because I think last time we talked about this, you and I were both like, the Knicks feel like this ethereal mystery with what's going on with that team, and I don't want to tip our hand. We might have some video content coming out on this, but there's been some deep scouting of the Knicks over here at Thinking Basketball, and their offense is impressive, and they are really good. And I also think when, who knows if the players will still be standing at the end of the year after they all play 42 minutes a night for the entire season. But they, as we've talked about, they do have some defensive personnel and some defensive DNA with their coach that can maybe tread water there. And I'm fascinated to see what happens if they get Mitchell Robinson back. They're a team that desperately needs every player on the bench adds to the depth because they desperately need the depth to not just play like 5 or 6 guys the entire game. But yeah, they're really good and their offense is really good. And I would not be surprised at all if they finish with the number 1 offense in the NBA this year.
Okay. So I proclaimed that the Cavaliers are in the vestibule of the inner circle for me.
Yeah.
Do you think that the Knicks are actually pretty equal with the Cavs, or do you think there's a little bit of separation between the two?
I mean, there's separation in the sense that when you especially in the regular season, when you stack them up, the Cavs have clear advantages. I mean, the defense is just a nice advantage. But where I think about it a little bit is there's certain matchups in the playoffs where the Knicks might be spunkier. I might be a little less surprised if the Knicks pull an upset over another top team. Like Knicks Cavs would be an awesome playoff series. Yeah. It would be cool if we could see the Cavs play someone really good and kind of get better scouting and insight into that. But the Cavs and the Knicks actually played very early in the year, I think October 30th. And that was one of the last times in this like long stretch outside of the Boston matchups that the Cavs have played one of the other really good teams in the league. Even Philadelphia, who's starting to look better. We'll talk about them in a second. They played like the G League version of Philadelphia when they met them. So yeah, Cleveland clearly is ahead to me, but there's some interesting upset potential with the Knicks.
Well, I think what's interesting is they actually juxtapose each other well, because like you were talking about, like Allen, of course, isn't going to space the court, but you put Mobley out there and it's like, all right, cute. You're shooting 43% from 3. Let's see how real that is when we get to the playoffs. On the other side, you have Karl Anthony Towns, where the Knicks, like, they love this early offense, 3-man pistol type action where you have Brunson bringing it up and Towns is up top. And it's just impossible to guard because of Brunson's herky-jerky nature. You got to hug up on Towns, and all of a sudden Brunson's at the rim. And you're like, what just happened? Like, what are we supposed to do about this?
Can we get a timeout? Can we get like a legit timeout? Yeah. Who would have put money down on Karl Anthony Towns going into the pressure cooker of New York and having it be like Vibes 9000? Like he feels like he was made to be a Knick, and I never would have guessed that after his 9 years in Minnesota of ups and downs and sort of like we've talked about the psychological turmoil and how he can get in his head. And it's like we haven't gotten to the playoffs yet, so we'll see what happens. But so far, he feels like he's thriving with the energy in New York. He's got some background there. It's just, I can't believe it. You turn on those games and he's dancing, he's popping threes, he's playing out of his mind on offense. Defense is that's another story, but the offense is out of his mind.
I gotta say, he's like, the way that he attacks off the trailing offense, it's very Dirk-like. Like, I know that's maybe blasphemous to say, but when he trails, he's the most unstoppable big, because if you're not hugging up on him 27 feet out, he's going to splash it in you. But then he puts it on the court, and he's like, maybe the best driving big man in the league. So yeah, Towns is incredibly versatile. But we've been saying this for years, Ben. I think last year we made in our sub All-Star podcast, we made the concession that talent-wise, he's an All-Star level player, but like, stuff happens where he gets in his own head. He gets so frustrated. I feel like I wish I could see a stat about who has the most turnovers, like per 100 when they're double teamed. because I feel like Towns would be like a really close to the top of the league in that. He just gets so frazzled in situations like that. And you say we'll see about the playoffs. I think that's a big if, because if you can promise me that we get this Towns in the playoffs, I mean, this Knicks team's incredible, right? That they're like really scary for anybody. But if you get the little bit of regression that, frankly, we've seen a few times in the playoffs, I don't know, it takes a lot of shine off of that New York team right now.
What about Memphis, Cody? We've
one more shout out for New York, Ben.
We could come back to New York. I just want to, I want to go ahead.
Noodles Bridges, Ben. This last month of December, I mean, call the man Spaghetti out there, because the length, the skill, I don't know if Spaghetti is just better than General Noodle, but he gets a name now because he's really dialed it up again. Like, I think this is the Mikal Bridges that people really wanted to see in New York, and that jumper's falling, and they just look a lot better when he's good. Like, imagine that, the guy that you trade like 5 first-round picks for, they just work better when he plays well.
So we have New York, okay? Memphis, we've done a lot of content on them. The wheel offense, the isolation games, the massive depth, the pace that they play at. Their defense is really good. They're just crushing people when they're healthy. Where are they for you in this conversation?
Okay. So my tiers that I have right now, I have those 3 in the inner circle and vestibule of the inner circle.
Sure,
right?
Yep.
My tier 2 then is 3 teams.
The Knicks.
The
Grizzlies. And this is where it gets fun.
I also have the Dallas Mavericks there.
Okay. Yeah. I think I completely agree so far. The real question is the real question is whether there are any more teams we want to include in that tier. Yeah.
Not right now. So let's talk about Memphis. Let's talk about Memphis for a second.
Okay. Memphis is interesting because I think you can make more of a postseason issues kind of case with them, because it's hard to play 11 or 12 guys in the postseason. And when you get to scout what they're doing, they're really going to have to demonstrate that they have the, dynastic Golden State Warriors feel for their own offense. In other words, if you scout them, or you see, we released this as a gamer, a great game series sort of spin-off from our Memphis content for members. You can also get that at patreon.com/thinkingbasketball. We're looking at the Lakers and how they defended the Grizzlies. And I think the Clippers did some similar stuff, where once you start to take away the middle against them, once you start to build a wall appropriately, and once you don't over-respond to sort of like traditional handoff or screening game that they are setting up, and then backdooring you and countering and spacing away and cutting and moving, it takes away the efficacy of those actions relative to what we're seeing, because they're so different. They're playing so differently than the rest of the NBA. So you get into a playoff series and you go, okay, they're going to scout this and they're going to take this away to some degree. Then that puts the onus back on the Grizzlies to say, I know my offense better than you. And if you're going to take it away, I'm going to have better handoff games because you're not paying attention to it. I'm going to have a better pick and roll game. I'm going to run more John Morant, right? So that's still a question to be determined to me, where if they get in a playoff series, how good can that, especially the offense? I'm not worried about the defense. The defense is really good, but how good can that offense be? And one more thing on that. I saw some people after the Grizzlies video that we ran say like, well, wait a second. They're really improved because they were all injured last year. First of all, every improvement in NBA history has come from either injuries or new players. That's typically how it works. Secondly, if we take this year's Grizzlies team and compare it to the 2023 Grizzlies team, which actually has fewer big name starters, like Dylan Brooks isn't there. They lost some other guys. Steven Adams isn't there. That team was around average on offense, Cody. This team is like +5 on offense. That is a massive jump. That is a titanic difference between average offense and +5. So it really, for me, does come down to some of those elements of like seeing what kind of counters they can bring back when defenses counter them. But they're really good, but I have some postseason questions.
You're absolutely right about the depth, where you kind of have to shave that down to like 8, maybe 9 guys when you get in the playoffs, just because the minutes get tight. I know Aldama and Scottie Pippen Jr. will for sure be in those playoff minutes, but like you were talking about, the way that you can defend the Grizzlies, you bring up the Lakers, and I think you even referenced the Clippers. I think the recent game against the Clippers is a pretty interesting blueprint, especially in the second half, of what you can do against the Grizzlies. Like Zubac, for instance, like he was just taking Jaren one-on-one. I know Jaren's drive game, his isolation game is so vastly improved, but it's still not generating necessarily easy shots. And Zubac is like, just come on, Take me one-on-one every time. And he was going for these floaters 8-10 feet away. And, they just weren't dropping. They weren't super efficient. He wasn't getting to the free throw line. He's not a great passer. He's not sending guys up that way. And then Ja, like there's just times he catches the ball and like the entire Clippers team just looks at the basket and like, all right, shoot. Let's see what happens. And you actually see in the fourth quarter, there are some minutes where Jaren and Ja go to the bench. Scottie Pippen Jr. comes out there, and just the improvement in spacing, they all of a sudden go in a run, right? And you're like, oh, maybe the Grizzlies should just go with this bench lineup right now. So, I think Ja is spectacular. I think he's an incredible passer. When he has the ball, you just like, you can't stay in front of him. He just teleports around people. But you can see between him and Jaren clear ways to counter what they do best out there. And that makes me, I don't know, it makes me concerned to the point where they're probably like, I'm not going to say anything. It just concerns me a little bit about the playoffs.
It's New Year's Eve. This is our 300th episode. Let's just take a question directly from the audience here that you and I have batted around for a while. And it's an homage to last week's picks with the 25 under 25. If you had to take 8 Grizzlies guys and get their top 8 for the playoffs, what are their top 8? What's the rotation look like? Wow. Who actually makes it? We know it's Ja. We know it's Desmond Bane. We know it's Jaren Jackson Jr. Those 3 are all set. I think you're pretty safe with Marcus Smart as the 4th player. Keep going.
Oh, man.
Do you want Brandon Clark in there? Because he seems like a flex to me.
You're saying that you don't necessarily think Brandon Clark's going to get.
I think what happens in the way they play and the lineups that they play is they can flex certain lineups around other players. I actually think Jay Huff, with the way he's playing, might be safer in more matchups in the playoffs. Right? He's solid defensively, and then the spacing and shooting element that he provides, and he just seems like he's got the chutzpah to play in big moments. So, but it's stuff like that where you say like, okay, if Vince Williams Jr. comes back, is he going to play regularly, or is it going to be someone else? I think these are the questions for Memphis, trying to either pick 8 guys or say we've got 5 or 6 guys that we always play, and then depending on the matchup, we can flex in 2 or 3.
Well, I think a big question here is the rookies. Like, do you think they end up losing their spots, both Edey and Wells?
Oh, Edey, I think, is a flex. Wells, I think, is absolutely a ride and die all the way to the final buzzer when they're eliminated, because he can shoot, and he's their only wing, really. He's 6'6", 6'7". He just has a pretty good feel for playing, and he can defend at a decent level for a rookie. So I feel like Wells is in there too.
I really don't want to feel like I'm a bit, but I do think Scottie Pippen Jr. and Aldama. I don't know if I were running the roster, obviously, because I drafted them in the under 25 draft. But I think like Pippen, again, he comes into the games and all of a sudden you see the defensive intensity ramp up from that point guard position. A guy that can space the floor, a guy that can drive a little bit. And then Aldama, you brought up the fact, sure, he's maybe a little bit weaker off the bounce. You can get some better guys to catch and create from there, but his extra passing, a little bit of spacing at the big position, not going to be taken advantage of defensively. Like, all of those are solid skills to have that you can rotate around and be like, all right, you're the 5 in some of these lineups, you're the 4 in some of these lineups, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know. I'd want both of those guys in my 8-man rotation.
I think Santi might also be in the rotation consistently because of his size and his passing. As long as the shot isn't crazy, I could see him getting at least 10 or 15 minutes a game in almost any playoff series. So he would be kind of like the 6th guy for me that I would probably put in. And then you flex the other guys. Scottie Pippen Jr., depending on matchup, you could flex the minutes up or down. He could be on the edge of the rotation. So that would be my answer there for Memphis. They're a really interesting team. Of course, we've devoted a ton of time to them. Cody, I might have one more team. I actually might chop this up slightly differently. Can I make a proposal? For a slightly different approach here? I kind of think New York and Dallas are in their own tier, in the sense that I think they could knock off one of the big guys. Yeah, they're dangerous. New York and Dallas.
You think that they're a step above Memphis, is what you're saying? In
the playoffs, yep. I think you can make that argument that they're a little bit more dangerous to knock off a big boy contender. Obviously, you look at the conferences and sometimes you only get to play one, but I think I would chop it up that way. And then before we go to how I would stack up sort of a next group of teams here in my mind, you're the resident homer. I have to ask you, the Orlando Magic, when they're all healthy, I mean, they've been very competitive. You scoffed at it earlier. You made a dismissive comment to me about how they don't have Boncaro and they don't have Franz Wagner, but they're very competitive without these guys. Their defense is so good. They play so hard. They have so many. They have a never-ending, just a limitless amount of Anthony Blacks. You're just like, what's going on? Anthony Black's in the game, and there's Cole Anthony, and there's Anthony's everywhere. They got players everywhere. If they get those two guys back, where should they fall in this conversation?
It's a really good question. It's almost not fair because you haven't seen it. By the way, for the record, in the 9 games that neither Paolo or Franz have played, they almost have a -3 net rating.
That's pretty amazing.
Sure, they're frisky, but I wouldn't say that they're like a good team.
Well, who are they playing? They've played some serious heavyweights.
Yeah, but still. My point stands.
I'm just saying if you take your 2 best players and we think of them as roughly star level players off a team, and then that team, if you adjust for schedule, plays like around 500 and has an elite defense or whatever, that's a really good foundation for when you add them back. They should be a 50-something win team easy, right?
Off the top of your head, do you know what the league average offense is?
113.7, something like that.
Okay. So they're shade under 107 when neither of them play.
Come on, that's
like a -6.
That's their offense.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's the defense though? The defense is amazing.
Well, then it's like a +4 or something like that. Their defense is incredible. That's a really good question. I don't know. Oh man, I guess I have to like show up here because I drafted both Franz and Paolo in my top 10 last time. I don't know. It sounds dumb because on one hand, I'm like, yeah, I think Paolo's really good. And I've seen enough in those few games that he played. But to also see them like cohesively go together and be like a dominant playoff team, I would need to see a little bit more before I say anything. So I would actually like push them out of this conversation right now.
Okay. Is anyone else then in the Orlando conversation? Is Orlando sort of like akin to Houston to you or the Bucks or something like that?
I like that. I like the Houston-Orlando combination. That's a good area for them.
Okay.
So there's a couple of teams that I want to put into like, they're not even like a vertical category. Like we're going to the horizontal right now. They're in their own little space over here. And they're called, we have guys that have all-time peaks, but the team's not very good for some reason. And
is Denver included in this?
Yeah, Denver's included in this. They're like the top of this one, but it's like Denver. Can I say other teams?
Yeah, please.
It's Denver, the Lakers, the Bucks, and then the 76ers.
Oh, wow. Okay, wow. Now we're getting somewhere. Okay, so Dorian Finney-Smith's Lakers to you are in the same group as the Magic and the Rockets and the Bucks and the Nuggets.
No, I'm saying that those other 4 teams I just said are like in a horizontal category. Like I'm not sure what to do with them. But they just have these guys that are incredible, and it feels like I want to give them a slight bump because they have guys that are incredible.
Well, I think we've reached the point in the show where I mean, we should have led with this, but this is the juicy part of the show. I like to save it for the people who listen all the way through. I think I kind of want to put the Philadelphia 76ers in the same group as Memphis.
Oh, ooh.
Yeah.
Ooh. Yeah. What have you seen over the last bit to make you think?
Week or two, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, first of all, we're assuming full health here. Mm-hmm. Secondly, and more importantly, I don't really like the roster around the big 3 that they've constructed, and that's why if you said Philadelphia looks good and they're all healthy and they're playing well, if I like the roster, they would be in one of the earlier groups that we discussed. They would be legitimately more dangerous in the playoffs, even sort of defanged at the start of the year. And I don't think their record would be this bad. I think there's a correlation. I think the symptom and the disease are going together here because the record is really poor because when they lost Embiid for X number of games, when Paul George doesn't play X number of games, even Maxey missing games, it's just a disaster. It's an absolute disaster. And so you see things like Gershon Yabusele is getting minutes because of his stretch big element that he adds because he can actually kind of shoot threes, but he really struggles in other areas. And so it's like Caleb Martin is a big deal for them. Getting good minutes from Kelly Oubre is a big deal from them. But Kyle Lowry's he's really old at this point. He's very long in the tooth. And, you know, Nico Batum's not there. Some of the key bench players that they need. So you're left with like, okay, what am I going to get? Can I get good minutes from like KJ Martin? But he can't shoot. Ricky Council, he can't shoot. So I think Jared McCain is huge in that sense. Just again, when you lack depth, having an extra body out there that can play 30 minutes and even if he has weaknesses, can really fill certain areas. This is why, to me, they're not higher, but they have started to look much better. The Celtics game, especially on Christmas, Embiid is starting to move. We'll probably never see peak Embiid again, as I mentioned. His season last year before he got injured was insane and might go down as the most underrated historical great season of all time because he never really got to have a playoffs. But if you look at the advanced numbers and you look at the film on how he was playing and you go back and you look at the profile we did, I mean, he was playing out of his mind. Absolutely insane high-level basketball. So you take like 70 or 80% of that, still really good. Paul George is a question mark, but, Paul George doesn't need to be superstar Paul George. Tyrese Maxey's fantastic. I just think when you get into a playoff series that once you start to get through a bunch of the top teams that we listed, you can't go too far without actually being like, no, I'd rather avoid Philadelphia than any of the other teams.
And you can see it, like, if you look at the December numbers, when Embiid and Maxey are on the court together, just throughout December, they got a +7.5 net rating. That's a healthy number, right? For a team that started, 2-14 or whatever it was when they started 2-12 or whatever it is to start the season. And you bring up Maxey, for instance, in that Celtics game. What makes him so tough is when you actually have Embiid running at, like you said, like whatever percentage of full health it is, it's still enough that Maxey can do is like running off screens, catching over here, firing from 5 feet behind the line, but also darting into the paint. And when he has that sort of free reign, you can't stay in front of him, right? He doesn't have the jaw superpower where you can give him the ball at the top. It's like ISO time, Maxey, just get to the basket. But if you give him some space off the catch, if you get him coming off a screen, catch, someone's trying to chase him and he goes in. I mean, he's right up there with some of the best in the league. And his floater package, Ben, the right, the left, these weird contorting little like angles that he hits up there. He's just incredible for all that, along with his shooting ability. So the better that Embiid gets, it's the better that Maxey gets. It's a really synergistic dance that those two have. And, I was watching some of that Raptors game, I think maybe yesterday or 2 days ago. Embiid's shot is falling. He definitely looks better than November, but like you said, it's still not like the physicality of last year where I'm like, it's a lot of really tough shots that you're living on right now. So I don't know if I'm quite as high on the 76ers as you, but I also get what you're saying.
Well, yes, I don't want to make it sound like I'm overselling them. I just think there was a point where I was ready to completely sell on this season with Philadelphia, and I actually don't think we hit that point. I think we're reversing course a little bit, and that has to be acknowledged once you get past the top teams that we talked about, that like, oh, actually in a playoff series, if these guys are healthy, probably kind of dangerous. And to the point about, Cody, when you said, what have you seen in the last little bit? It's really just the last couple weeks, the month of December. But this is not something to scoff at in my assessment. In the last 6 games, Joel Embiid has played the entire game and been healthy. Philadelphia is 6-0. That's not a thing to scoff at in the NBA today. That's not easy to do. They won at Chicago. They won at Boston. They crushed Portland in Portland after Portland had 2 or 3 really nice home wins in a row, thanks to Denny Avdia taking over the game at the end of the game. And I think their only loss in that stretch is against a Pacers team that we have to probably talk about next because they've completely turned their season around. And Embiid played like 17 minutes in that game. I think he left. I can't remember what injury that was. He's got so many injuries at this point. But that was the only game they actually lost where he played part of the game. So I kind of feel like they have avoided this like disaster season, and now they've righted the ship, and we'll see how good it can get.
Yeah. So you were talking about, oh no, I was just about to say I made a mistake. I think it said they were playing the Raptors. I was wrong. I was talking about the Blazers game. I can picture in my mind like the Ayton reactions to some of the shots that Embiid was making, and I don't know why I was thinking it was
like 5 or 6 in a row or something from mid-range off one leg. And that's what I'm saying. When you have that level of talent that you can access, and we've talked about it this year, we talked about it at the beginning of the year, I'll bring it back right now. I think in 2025, the 3 simplified ways to look at teams: category 1, star power; Philadelphia, depending on what happens with Paul George and his podcasting schedules, maybe they're elite in the star power because Maxey and Embiid bring it, especially if they're healthy, of course. Number 2 is fit. And the 3 of them fit together pretty well. It's the rest of the roster that I kind of worry about in terms of fit. And 3 is depth. And so it's like, okay, they potentially are awesome in the superstar power category. The fit is somewhere in the middle. It might be pretty good. And the depth might be a disaster. And when you stack that up against the teams ahead of them, yes, they're not going to be in our top 5. But I think you can't ignore them if you're forecasting to the playoffs and saying, how good is this team when they're healthy the rest of the way? I think they have to be discussed.
Now, something you said, and I'm going to admit right now, I haven't watched a ton of them lately. It's been a couple weeks actually since I've seen one of their games.
Washington Wizards?
No, I watch them nightly, Ben. I've seen every game.
Yes. Go ahead.
Indiana.
Yeah.
What are you seeing from Indiana?
I glance at Indiana. Earlier in the year, it looked like they just could not get anything going. The wheels were like not attaching to the cart. They didn't even fall off the cart. They just weren't attaching. You're like, why can't the Indiana offense ever get going? It looked like they were just having a disaster of a year. Some teams like Sacramento have seen this happen. They've just completely fallen off. And then it felt like overnight they flipped a switch. And I don't know what that like flipping of that switch was, but they were 9-14 on December 6th, heading into a game in Chicago, and they are now 16-17. So I'm not a math major, but that's 7-3 in the last 10 games. They won at Boston, not full strength Boston. They were up like 17 against the Thunder. Oklahoma City came back and just stole that game, so they lost to the Thunder. They won at Golden State. They blew Sacramento out by 27 in Sacramento. They won at Phoenix, so they went on this West Coast trip and had a tremendous success story. They've just started playing way better. And I don't know. Obviously, they made the conference finals last year thanks to some injuries for opponents, but they had bite last year. We saw it in the NBA Cup. They had bite, and it kind of feels like that bite might be coming back out of nowhere.
I hate to do like the lowest level of analysis, but while you were talking, I just pulled up some splits of Tyrese Halliburton. Because in my mind, I'm like, all right, this ship, the cart isn't going really anywhere unless like the main horse here is really revving like he has in the past. And when I look at some of the splits, his December numbers don't look appreciably better than his November numbers. So again, I haven't watched much of the Pacers, so I can't speak to whether or not Halliburton himself looks a lot better. So I'm just going to add to this and say, you've intrigued me. I've overlooked a team that clearly has made a little bit of a turnaround. And I need to go back and see like what is driving the change then, if this is the case. Because I do know the other question that you and I have perpetually had about them is the fit between Siakam and Halliburton. Every time I log in, when I watch them, I'm like, ooh, I like this rim protecting tandem of Turner and Siakam, because Turner can step out and then Siakam's going and making a play at the rim. You're like, ooh, I like all this defensive stuff. Nembhard, of course, is a frisky little defender. Nesmith, when he's healthy, is another frisky defender. So like, I think they're an interesting defensive team. And, I think that's where Siakam actually fits in better. But I want to check back in and see what the offense looks like and if there's a little bit of a change so far.
I'm with you. They had a 15-point lead against the Bucks as we're recording. They blew that. The Milwaukee won by 8. So it's 7 out of 11 for them. And we haven't really seen the Tyrese Halliburton that we've seen from the past. So I kind of wonder what's going on. But they've clearly got some bite in their teeth back. All of a sudden out of nowhere. There's a couple other teams I want to run by you before we get out of here, Cody.
Okay.
I'll start with the one that I think has to be discussed for time reasons. Has to be discussed. The Denver Nuggets.
Yeah.
They have not been entirely healthy. So Aaron Gordon has missed a bunch of time. Jamal Murray's missed a bunch of time. And then when Jamal Murray plays, we don't know if Jamal Murray can move like Jamal Murray used to move. Is the same person. Did the aliens come down from Space Jam and zap Jamal Murray's powers at some point? These are the questions to me, because right now they're just, and I'm going to make this a verb. It should be a verb. They're just Nikola Jokicing wins. You know what that is? That's when you like play the Wizards and you're down by 20 and then you win by like 5 in overtime and Jokic has like 50, 15 and 14. And then you're like, you look at the stats and you're like, the Nuggets are 18-13 with a negative 5-point differential. How long is this going to go on for? I'm just saying, is there something in there where if they are all healthy and they all click and this other weird thing going on where when Russell Westbrook comes off the bench and doesn't play with Nikola Jokic, he's like the worst possible Russell Westbrook. But when he plays with Nikola Jokic, he's like some sort of super Rajon Rondo. I think he had like a 7-for-7 triple double last night. You're just like, have you seen him play with Nikola Jokic? He's like, I cut to the basket, I get a layup, I get steals, I get rebounds, I pass the ball. It's amazing. I'm just throwing it out there. Like, where is Denver in this conversation? It feels like a pretty wide range of outcomes from a team that just won the title 2 years ago. And then you and I both thought last year were just like maybe the best team in the West, like right there on the brink of another title, or at least a tough matchup against the Celtics.
Well, first of all, I think it would be cool if we could have like a list of the players that seem like they clearly like to play with each other. Because Westbrook and Jokic really do like to play with each other. Like the vibes between those two is just like, this is great. Like even Westbrook's like, ooh, wraparound, I'm going to throw to this guy because he's going to make this like pirouetting banker from 8 feet away and I'm going to get an assist out of it. That's going to be great. With that all said, like this is the fact that I even like said them in the same breath as the Bucks should be like a death knell for their championship odds, because Jokic is amazing. Jokic is the best player in the league. When he's out there, he's of course going to get you a chance to win any regular season game. But like you talked about, you get up to any of those higher tier teams, Ben, not only do they have like all NBA plus type talent and multiple of them, they're just deep. Like we're talking about the Grizzlies, and it's like, who's going to play in the playoffs? And the Nuggets are over here like, can I take 3? Can we get 3 of those guys? Like give us half of the Grizzlies roster and we'll be fine, right? So they don't have the depth. They don't have the secondary star power. I don't know, Ben. I just don't see a big run that's going to change my mind about them.
Okay. So to me, this all comes down to Jamal Murray. It all comes down to Jamal Murray. When Jamal Murray has been that blue arrow that we know and love, Denver has been a title level team. This goes back to 2020. Maybe you can say they're on the fringe. They played the Lakers much tougher than a 5-game series in the bubble. They obviously lost one of those games at the buzzer on an Anthony Davis 3. If that's not there, I just don't think they're even remotely in the conversation. So to me, the question has to be, do you think they can access that? Or do you think he can access that while the rest of the stuff with the roster comes together? And while you think about that, Cody, I do want to point out statistically, and this doesn't like totally make sense in my brain. I actually would like to ask you, if you haven't looked it up, do you know what the Nuggets net rating is when Nikola Jokic is on the court this year?
I mean, isn't it like plus 10 or something like that?
It's plus 11. What? He's in the 90th percentile. Like only like Clevelanders and Bostonians are ahead of him. It's very confusing. This is why I think you cannot take a player that good with a team that is still functional. Like, yes, your points about Memphis and depth are warranted, but you were the one who picked Christian Brown last week. So, he's there. Aaron Gordon. Who else plays on that team? Help me out. There's one more guy I'm forgetting. Cody.
Peyton Watson?
No. Not Peyton Watson.
Michael
Porter Jr. Michael Porter Jr. Yes. So it's a similar thing, though. Unless you think Michael Porter Jr. has sort of, been poofed out of existence in terms of his talents. He's played much better in the past. Unless you think none of those things are accessible, then I understand not saying anything here about Denver. But if there's something else accessible, how can you have a player that good whose results are this good and just be like, it goes back to my Philly thing. Like you just start to run out of teams you'd rather play in the postseason before Denver. Now, to be clear, if we're being sort of retrospective, on December 31st, 2024, I would not have Denver as one of the 8 or 10 teams I'd be afraid to play today. But going forward, if they're healthy, I don't think you get too many teams, right?
I don't want to be reductive in my analysis, but again, the league is too good and too deep to, even if you have an all-time level player in Jokic, there needs to be somebody else that's like really good out there. And it all rests on, like you said, Jamal Murray. And you said, what do you think? Do you think you can access that? I don't know, because I don't know what's going on with Jamal Murray. So like, I'm not going to play armchair psychologist. I'm not going to play armchair doctor. I don't know what else you can do. I'm not going to play, I don't know. I don't know what else I could play to try and diagnose what's going on, but it's not great. Like there's some defensive coverages where just like, he's just kind of off and he goes to close out and it's slow. And you're like, is that just an effort thing? it's really confusing. I just don't quite get it. So unless he literally gets himself up to like all-star plus, approaching all NBA like we've seen in the playoffs at his best, it's a long shot, Ben. Like long shot to the point where you don't even see the target.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I just feel like he needs like Dr. Bruce Banner or someone to sort of help him. That's the Hulk, Cody. That's the
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
that's
Yes.
the Incredible Hulk. Yeah.
I understand like movie and nerd culture references. It's
Okay,
like
okay.
Sport games, the other sports out there.
Sport games, yes.
Yeah,
I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
Who else needs to be discussed before we get out of here?
There's a team.
Is that everyone? Those are all the teams?
Here's a team that I'm going to bring up, but they're in the middle of some
Weird
inner turmoil.
Yeah.
That might bring them down. The Heat are just kind of heating.
Yes. That was the other team that I wanted to bring up before we got out of here. I had to go Denver first because I didn't know how much time we were going to spend on it. But Miami is like playing well lately. They look good. Tyler Hero looks better, and on and on and on. And Jimmy Butler has had some amazing games this month. And then they're like, well, we're going to trade Jimmy Butler. And then Pat Riley's like, we are absolutely not trading Jimmy Butler. And every time I've heard that in my entire sports life, I'm like, they're trading Jimmy Butler. Now, I don't know if that means they're going to trade him this year because there's some stuff with moving salary and all that. But it's weird because they started to look dangerous. Let's put it that way.
I could see Jimmy Butler being the type of guy that if he actually isn't traded, he'd go on like a spectacular run, take them all the way to the finals, and then at the end of the season be like, yeah, look at how good I am, still trade me, and then just like sulk through the playoffs. But I don't know, he's still such a brilliant basketball player. He's definitely lost a step from what we've seen a couple of years ago, but like you talk about these guys that just control the game with their understanding of space, their understanding of their opponent and things like that. Jimmy Butler is just one of these underrated IQ guys when it comes to playing the game of basketball, like knowing when to take a certain matchup one-on-one empty side, get him down for like a nice little turnaround, not dominating with the athleticism, knowing when to dig and like get that steal at the nail sort of thing, or jump the passing lane or something like that. When you have somebody like that still like has some level of athleticism like he does have, it makes the game so much easier for everyone else. And then, like you said, Tyler Hero is easily his best season right now. He's just a flamethrower when he gets going. And as we saw between him and Thompson's little scuffle the other day in Houston, like he's ready to like get in people's faces. He wants the smoke out there, Ben. I don't know what's going on with Bam. Like he still doesn't look like what we've seen from the last couple seasons. If he did, I think we'd be talking about Miami a little bit more interestingly, but there's a little bit too much turmoil for them to really take them seriously.
Yeah. There's a lot of fun teams right now. There's a lot of moving and shaking and fun things happening. And, we didn't even really get to the Lakers. I'm fascinated by the sort of theft that they just pulled off, sort of getting rid of D'Angelo Russell, which doesn't feel like a fit piece that helped them at all. And then getting back Dorian Finney-Smith, which could be a fantastic compliment. You get one of these big 3-and-D forwards. We saw him in Dallas a couple years ago, have a great run there. And I feel like since they moved Max Christie into the starting lineup and kind of said, hey, we need a little bit more defensive oomph in this rotation to balance things out, they've been much better, but it's hard to actually detect any signal through the noise because AD's had some plantar fasciitis and LeBron's missed some games. And it's like, we know no matter what age he is, LeBron isn't ramping up anyway at this point in the year. He's saving it for later in the year. They might still have some trades to make before the trade deadline. You never know what the roster is going to look like, but that's another team that is in this mix of teams we just talked about with Miami, with Denver. It's a very, very interesting kind of set of shakers and movers in the middle class. Indiana, Milwaukee's obviously come storming back. Yeah, it's a lot of fun this season.
It really feels like there's clear levels of demarcation across the league. Like you have your big, like these guys are going for the title. Then you have, like you said, the healthy middle class who on any given night, like if you're Boston, you don't want to roll into any of these teams. Like it's going to be a tough fight. There's only a few teams that, you roll into. I'm not going to say some team names, but there are some games where you can roll and be like, all right, we could probably take the gas off just a little bit, make it an interesting little game for the fans. Maybe we'll go to overtime. The kids can get another bucket of popcorn out there, staying up to 10:30, a little bit past the bedtime. Like they can do that against those teams. But in general, I think most nights there's a lot of competitive basketball.
Atlanta, Minnesota, and the Spurs, I would all put in a special bucket called can beat you any night, annoying to play. That's what they would be. But it's not the playoff facing thing that we've discussed and that we always do when we stack teams up. But those teams will catch an upset. They will absolutely catch an upset, and they are fun to watch when they do that. So yeah, it's been, I don't know, I've loved the basketball this year. I think it's been very fun. You know what hasn't been fun, Cody? I have to get this. Like patreon.com/thinking-basketball. It's the best way to support us. You can get all our extra member video content and thing. You can get that on YouTube too if you want to sign up over there. You get it both places. If you do Patreon, you get all our other stuff. We got a live monthly Q&A. I got to fast forward myself through this because I got to get to this rant. The 65 game thing, the 65 game award cutoff. This is like, I feel like this is not having the intended consequence. I feel like we are in the knock-on effect part of this situation where players want to play more anyway. They put this in to try to say, hey, we don't want load management. We don't want guys resting. But at the same time, a bunch of people around the league said, hey, we have our research. And it turns out we don't need to load manage as much. And the players were like, we want to play anyway. Right. And the league was like, hey, for financial reasons and other reasons that maybe aren't so savory or family, we can't have you messing around with the injury reports and resting people randomly and things like that. So just try to play. And everyone was on board with that. And now what happens is, just like any other year in the 90s or the 2000s or whatever, Cody, you and I went through like 50 players the other day. Guys have minor injuries throughout the year. Medium-sized injuries. Maybe they're not, maybe minor is like 2 games. And they miss 18, 20 games. They play 59 games. They play 64 games. They play 62 games. You're going to see a bunch of players this year that with that number, and they're just ineligible for everything. And at the end of the year, what are we going to have? We're going to have like the 38th best player on the all NBA team. It just gets weird for me.
Yeah. And I think Howard Beck was talking about this on the Real Ones podcast, but he was saying that, there's kind of this baked-in calculus that voters already used in the past where, maybe if a guy's cruising down to 59 games, you don't really vote for him, right? Like people weren't told to do that, but it seemed like throughout history, there's just not many instances of guys that don't hit that 65 arbitrary cutoff and are voted in. Like, of course you have a couple of them, but once again, I think the point he was bringing up, it's like, well, what if you have somebody like Kevin Durant, let's say he has a heater of a season, or even Luka Doncic, who's maybe the better example. What if he misses the cutoff? He plays 64 games, not 60. 60.
He's going to set all the records if he plays 64 seasons. Keep going.
Luka comes back, plays 64 games. The Mavericks win their last 25 games. He's just having an all-time heater. And they're like, nope, can't give you a vote because you were 1 game off. Like the arbitrary cutoff, it feels like there needs to be more leeway on this, Ben.
But that's what they did in the past. There were certain players, and it wasn't broken. Why try to fix it if it's not broken? There were certain players who had great years, but they missed too much time. And so relative to a peer, the voting body said, we're going to put you, second team, third team, all NBA. Steph Curry, 2018, whatever it is. You missed 25 games. And then I don't know if people know this, but one of the most famous, incredible seasons in the league's history, 1978, Bill Walton won MVP playing 58 games. And it was a fascinating MVP race between him and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. It still generates discussion to this day. No one's saying that Kareem wasn't worthy of also winning the MVP. But if you had some fixed, weird, arbitrary cutoff, it just wouldn't have been a discussion. You would just usher this player out the door and along you go. And I feel like that's what's sort of being missed. You want to generate excitement about the players. You want to celebrate the best players. And I don't know how this does it. So I'm glad to hear that you're coming around, because I've been really old man yelling at clouds about this. Every time someone gets injured this year, I'm like, oh, get the 65 game thing. What is the all NBA team going to look like? It's yeah.
Coming around, was I pro 65 games?
I don't know. I thought you were less. I thought you were more okay with it, but I don't want to misrepresent your opinion at all.
I'm more that you probably have a better season if you play more games, right? Like, I think that's a big thing that should be factored in. I actually don't know if I ever came out strongly like, yes, I love rules, Ben, give me 65 games or nothing. But it sucks. You see somebody like Paolo hurts his oblique 3 games in, you're like, well, I guess, this is it. He's not going to be getting any award. Like, it sucks that early on.
He gets nothing. He gets absolutely nothing. He probably won't get a shake at the All-Star game, because they like to do the voting. When are they doing? When are they finalizing the voting for the All-Star game? Like tomorrow? Right? They like to do that early. They don't take that out as far as it could be taken close to the All-Star game. Although I think the last couple of years they've moved it back a little bit, which is nicer to get more of a sample. But you lose the All-Star game, and then you lose all the other stuff. You lose all NBA stuff. You lose. Here's the other thing, Cody. Historically speaking, and we've done content on this before, having some understanding of where you fall in the MVP ladder gives you a picture historically of what people were thinking in this voting body. And when you eliminate people, you throw away all the person who could finish 5th or 6th or 8th or 10th. And it's really helpful. It's really helpful to go back to a year and go, this guy finished 5th, but he missed 20 games. So boy, people must have thought he was really good. And now what's happening is when you open up on Basketball Reference, you open up your MVP voting history, you will never see players that played under 65 games anymore. And you will lose all that context and historical comparison. And that's just sad for me.
And I think that really matters. Like, it really does. Like, you and I obviously are in the bag for historical stuff, but I think having that historical view and understanding all of that sort of stuff really helps you appreciate and understand the modern game even more. Before you send us off, which I know you were just about to do, Ben, we have a few hours left until 2025 is here. And I know neither of us are going to sit here on this live stream until next year. So just are you what is it called? I can't even talk right now. I lost my mind.
I don't know what you're asking me. This feels like a very big moment, and I'm excited.
Resolution. Are you a resolution guy?
No, I don't think you are either. Are you?
No.
Apparently
I came off kind of like a jerk. Like my parents at Christmas asked me, like, "Oh, are you kind of a resolution person?" And I was like, "No, because if I'm going to make a change in my life, I'm just going to do it."
Yeah.
And my wife's like, "You probably came off a little strong on that one," but.
I appreciate you saving me there, because that's what I was about to say when you asked me. I have a similar philosophy. Yeah, I don't want to sound dismissive of people who do the resolution thing. If it helps you, that's fantastic. But I think, Cody, you and I are alike on this one. I automatically just kind of say, why wait until tomorrow to do it when you can just start today? Yeah,
that's beautiful.
Make every day a New Year's resolution if it works.
Okay, I'm going to give you one question. I didn't prepare you for this. Tell me one non-basketball thing from 2024 that you want to celebrate. It could be like a movie you saw. Could be I don't know what workout you had. YouTube channel you like.
A workout I had.
Yeah, you're like out on October 3rd. I don't know.
October 3rd. I had an amazing October 3rd workout. Can I think about that and ask you your answer?
Wow.
Oh, you want to put me on the spot, but you didn't think about your own answer. I assume this podcast doesn't count, does it?
Wait, you want to shout out like the Thinking Basketball podcast?
No, you said one thing you want to celebrate from this year that's not basketball, and I was saying getting to podcast with you. Does that not
sweet.
Count?
Oh, yeah. That's not fair. I was going to say something general. Now you're being sentimental.
That's what came into my head. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's very kind of you. I didn't see as many movies as before, but I really liked the movie I saw, The TV Glow. I thought it was really fun. I don't see many postmodernist type of movies that kind of break into the mainstream a little bit, but I've thought about that movie a lot. So not my favorite movie of the year, but I've thought about it the most.
I think for me, it was probably surviving COVID. That was probably the one. We have to leave on this epic comment. Someone in the audience has made an epic comment. They've just called 2024 the year of the Luigi. And this reminds me, Cody, I'll be vulnerable here. When I was a kid, if I was ever in a huge space, I don't even know if parents can do this anymore. Like, do you need your kid on a leash if you're in a big space? Can you just like go into Costco and have them wander into the store and then meet them somewhere else? Is that a thing that happens?
I don't know.
You don't know?
I haven't seen that too often, I'll be honest.
No, I'm saying, so kids do get like lost in the back of stores and things like that.
I guess I can't think of the last time I saw a wayward child when I was shopping though.
Right, you can't, right? Neither can I.
No.
Yeah, so maybe it doesn't happen anymore.
Did it happen to you?
No, yes, this is what I'm trying to say. This is the whole point of this story about the name Luigi, which is not just a Mario brother. When I was a kid, Cody's losing it. I don't know why. This is a very sincere story. When I was a kid, if I was in a huge store in a big space with my mother and she couldn't find me, she would just start yelling my name. She would just start frantically yelling my name. And one day I told her, I was like, Mom, You don't have to like yell it's a little weird for me. You're just yelling my name. It's ridiculous. You look crazy. What's going on? And she's like, well, what do you want me to do when I can't find you? And I said, what I want you to do is I want you to start going around and say Luigi. That's what I want you to do. And my mother literally did this for years. She would be in a store and I would be right next to her sometimes and she wouldn't even notice. She'd be like at the cash register paying and she'd be like, Luigi. And I'd be like, I'm right here.
What? Why did you want her to say Luigi?
I don't know. It's just, maybe I liked Luigi more than Mario.
That's incredible. But you didn't have to pick either of them. Like she wasn't like, hey, which of the Mario Brothers names should I call out when you're missing?
We got to end the show.
She gave you any option.
That's it. I hope everyone has a happy new year. Thanks for listening as always, and that you're having a great day.